The Arcane of Vanished Ancient Cities. Troy, Unsolved Mysteries. History is full of secrets, and some of the biggest mysteries lie buried beneath the dust of time. Imagine entire cities, once bustling with life, now vanished without a trace. What happened to them? Where did they go? From ancient civilizations swallowed by the earth to legendary metropolises lost to myth, we're about to embark on a journey to uncover the truth behind these enigmatic lost cities. In this part, we come to Troy with its fierce, historic war. Let's go. The city of Troy, known as Troya in Turkish, was founded by the Hittites in the 3rd century BC and later became known worldwide through Homer's two epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. According to Homer, the Trojan War took place around 1184 BC. Legend. The mythical beginnings of the Trojan War. The legendary Trojan War was inspired by the story of Prince Paris, Western history's most handsome prince. During a banquet with his fellow nobles, he inquired about the woman with the most exquisite beauty who deserved to be his wife. The nobles saw Helen, Sparta's stunningly beautiful, golden-haired queen, as the perfect match for Paris. The union of the most beautiful people from the east and west seemed ideal. Helen, however, had already married Spartan King Menelaus. Even so, Paris is determined to win Helen's heart and seeks the help of the gods. Coincidentally, the wedding of King Peleus of Greece and the sea goddess Thetis was taking place. The wedding took place in Pelion and all the gods and goddesses were invited. Only Eris, the goddess of quarrel, was not invited, for obvious reasons. Wherever she went she was spewing hatred and brawls. After realizing that she was not invited to the wedding, she became furious. She picked a golden apple from the garden of the Hesperides and went to the banquet invisible. She arrived right on time for the feast and went straight to the table where the Olympians were sitting. She tossed the golden apple in the middle of the table, with the inscription to the fairest one. The goddesses Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena each claimed to be the most beautiful and desired the apple. Eris put Zeus in a difficult position by asking him to give the apple to the fairest. Zeus wisely declined and delegated the difficult task to Paris, Asia's most attractive man and the second son of King Priam of Troy. Before passing judgment, Paris told the goddesses his story. Aphrodite promised to help him, and Paris eventually chose her. This decision, known as the Judgment of Paris, became legendary and has been passed down for centuries. Paris went to Sparta and successfully seduced Helen, causing her to abandon her husband and flee with him, taking some of Menelaus' wealth. Enraged by this betrayal, Menelaus sought help from his brother, King Agamemnon of Mycenae, to reclaim his wife and wealth. Agamemnon was deeply offended and resolved to lead an army against Troy, not only to reclaim Helen for his younger brother but also to restore his own dignity. And thus the legendary Trojan War began. The Trojan horse makes history. Within the city of Troy stood a wooden statue of the goddess Athena, known as the Palladium. The Greeks knew that as long as Troy possessed this statue, the city would remain safe. Recognizing this, the Greeks sent their skilled warriors, Diames and the cunning Odysseus, to climb the walls of Troy, infiltrate the temple of Athena, steal the Palladium, and bring it back to the Greek army camp under the cover of a dark night. However, even with the protective statue in their possession, the Greeks understood that, without a decisive blow, the war would never end. Nearly 10 years had passed, and the walls of Troy still stood strong against the relentless Greek assaults. Attacking the four sides of the city with 4 armies wasn't enough. They needed a force to strike from within to have any hope of conquering Troy. However, how could they get this 5th army into the city? Once again, the Greeks turned to Odysseus's ingenuity. He ordered the craftsmen to build a colossal wooden horse within 3 days, large enough to conceal several dozen men. Odysseus himself would enter the horse, along with other warriors like Neoptolemus, Epeius, Menelaus, and more than 10 other brave soldiers. The horse had a strong, secure latch from the inside. After the warriors entered its belly, the Greeks left their horses outside, facing the Scaean gate of Troy, then burned the camp and boarded boats pretending to anchor away. When the Trojans saw the Greek camps ablaze and the ships departing, they naively rejoiced, believing that the Greeks had finally admitted defeat and the 10-year war was over. They rushed to the Greek army camp and only saw the remnants of a decade-long army encampment. But why was a giant wooden horse left behind? At the same time, the Trojans captured Sinon, a Greek soldier left behind by Odysseus. Brought before King Priam of Troy, Sinon explained that the Greeks, weary of the endless war they couldn't win, had decided to withdraw and return home. However, before their departure, they were reprimanded by the goddess Athena. She was furious that the Greeks had dared to steal the Palladium from Troy. She declared that if they wanted to return home safely, they must offer the blood sacrifice of a Greek, just as they had done at the beginning of the war. Otherwise, they would face punishment. Sinon claimed that he was the one chosen by Odysseus for the sacrifice but had cleverly managed to escape. The end of the Trojan War. King Priam, perhaps too preoccupied with mourning the death of his son Hector, unquestioningly believed Sinon's story. Sinon explained that the wooden horse was a result of Athena's rage over Palladium's theft. The goddess instructed them to create a wooden horse to return to Troy in place of the stolen statue that served as the city's talisman. The Greeks made the wooden horse so large that the Trojans couldn't bring it into the city. This meant that if the Greek army returned, Troy would not be protected. Odysseus' story, as told to King Priam by Sinon, was plausible enough for the king to consider. If they could bring the wooden horse, Athena's talisman, inside, Troy would be eternally strong. The king was also concerned that the horse would be too large to pass through the city gates, so he directed the Trojan army to breach a section of the city wall in order to bring the wooden horse inside. However, not everyone believed Sinon's fabricated words. Laocoon, an Apollo priest, tried hard to stop King Priam, but Athena, who still hated Paris, sent 2 divine snakes from beneath the sea to bite and kill him. Seeing this, the Trojans became even more convinced that the wooden horse was a god's talisman, and they were determined to bring it into the city. When the wooden horse entered the city, King Priam's cursed daughter, the prophetess Cassandra, wept and warned the people of Troy of the impending disaster. Only taunts were exchanged in response to her words. That night, while the soldiers and people of Troy were sleeping peacefully, Sinon sneaked to the beach, lit a fire as a signal, and gently knocked on the belly of the wooden horse. Hearing the signal, the Greek warriors on the horse opened the latch and crawled out. They spread out to all 4 city gates, killing all of the guards, opening the gates wide, and setting fire to the city's houses. Troy was instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. The Greek fleet, which had been hiding around a nearby island, returned quickly and landed their troops after seeing the fire signal. It was too easy when the fortress was opened on all sides for the Greek soldiers to rush in and slaughter freely. The Greeks destroyed one of antiquity's largest city-states. Menelaus captured Helen, but he was drawn to her beauty and chose not to kill her. Troy was burned, and Hector's son was sacrificed to bring the 10-year war to an end. Later, terms like Trojan horse and Fifth Army became classics, referring to the internal support strategy of striking from within. They also provide endless inspiration for works of literature, art, and the fine arts. Artifacts, archaeological relics. In 1871, based on descriptions in the epic Iliad, the self-proclaimed German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, at the age of 49, discovered the ruins of what he believed to be Troy beneath the Hisarlik Hill in the Troas region of what is now northwestern Turkey. Even so, Schliemann was not the first to believe that the city described by Homer was located at that exact site. Before him, the English archaeologist Frank Calvert had conducted excavations in the same area. The 2 researchers, obsessed with Troy, happened to meet each other. Calvert had previously purchased land around Hisarlik to continue his work but lacked the funds to maintain his excavation efforts. And Calvert convinced Schliemann to continue excavating at the very place he had to abandon. After encountering some initial setbacks, Schliemann patiently continued the excavations until 1872, when he found remnants several meters high belonging to a prehistoric city. Schliemann concluded that these walls had once been part of the fortress of Troy. Among his most significant discoveries at Troy, Schliemann was particularly impressed with a storage place for gold and artifacts. In 1873, he named them Priam's treasure. Schliemann removed this treasure from the area and handed it over to the German government for display. The treasure was lost during World War II and was later found in part in Russia. Currently, these treasures are kept at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. However, Schliemann's claims about Priam's treasure turned out to be wrong. The treasure thought to be Priam's was actually a relic from an unnamed culture that developed 1,250 years before ancient Troy. In fact, the search for the ancient city of Troy has been ongoing for hundreds of years, yet no one has proven that a Trojan War ever took place. What Homer wrote and what Schliemann used as a basis for his archaeological work are still controversial to this day. We do not know if this war ever happened. Schliemann himself studied the Iliad in ancient Greek. He believed that the war at Troy was real history and began his work based on that belief. Schliemann died in Naples on December 26, 1890. For a long time, the Germans did not appreciate his achievements. In fact, he was controversial, seen more as an adventurer than an archaeologist. According to Baltrush, modern archaeologists warn against emulating his methods because he did not conduct his work according to the archaeological standards of the time. Nevertheless, with his efforts, the world still venerates Heinrich and considers him one of the most important archaeologists of all time. Regardless of his archaeological approach, Schliemann will forever be associated with the name Troy, Baltrush says. His work on the mythical city certainly made him one of the most famous archaeologists in the world. Side information. According to some unofficial sources from Google, about our self-proclaimed archaeologist, at that time, due to a lack of historical understanding and relying only on the Iliad epic by the blind Greek poet Homer, along with a bit of haste, our archaeologist excavated the ruins of Troy by using explosives. Yes, you heard it right, explosives. The explosives destroyed layer after layer of rock until Schliemann found what he believed to be King Priam's treasure, deep beneath Hisarlik. Afterward, our archaeologist and his wife, who was his collaborator, smuggled the treasure out of Turkey. But the problem is, the treasures Schliemann took were not entirely from Troy but from an even older city, meaning they belonged to a layer beneath the famous Troy. This means that while excavating with explosives, Schliemann inadvertently blew up the remains of Troy without realizing it. The consequences of this amateurish and crazy method of excavation have been condemned by other archaeologists for over 140 years. About archaeological sites in Hisarlik. The site of Hisarlik contains multiple layers of settlement, each representing a different period in the city's history. These layers, identified by archaeologists as Troy I through Troy IX, provide a chronological framework for understanding the development of the city over time. Troy I, circa 3000 to 2600 BCE, the earliest layer of settlement, representing a small and relatively simple community. Troy II, circa 2600 to 2250 BCE, a more complex and prosperous city, characterized by impressive fortifications and evidence of trade with other regions. Troy III to V, circa 2250 to 1700 BCE, a period of decline and rebuilding, with evidence of destruction and subsequent reconstruction. Troy VI, circa 1700 to 1250 BCE, a wealthy and influential city, with extensive trade networks and impressive fortifications. This layer is often associated with the legendary city of Troy described in Homer's epics. Troy VII, c. 1250 to 950 BCE, a period of decline and destruction, possibly corresponding to the time of the Trojan War. Troy VIII to IX, c. 950 BCE 500 CE, the later periods of settlement, including the Hellenistic and Roman periods. The Trojan War, legend, or history. The Trojan War has long been a subject of heated debate, with evidence supporting both views, fact and fiction. The first part has concluded. If you found it interesting, please remember to subscribe to the channel for the next installment.